Eamon, first to you, a big win and the teal tidal wave. It was quite something at the weekend. How do you read it?
Good to be with you, Kieran. Look, it was a huge win. It was a great Labor win. And I think a lot of people basically had their say. It is a message, I think, to people in politics right around the country that people want something much more considered. There's no doubt that it's a really harsh loss for the Liberals. They've lost so many seats in their heartland, and there's going to be a lot of soul searching on that side. The trick now for Labor will be to continue what is a very, very positive approach, build that consensus and work with that crossbench and basically stay right in the middle, which is what people want to see.
Eamon, do you think there was, when you look at the primary vote down for Labor, but the teal wave being as strong as it was, what do you see one relating to the other, that the primary vote was down because in some of those teal seats, people that might be voting Labor on a normal election actually went, no, we'll vote for this candidate because they've got a chance of winning?
There's absolutely no doubt, Kieran, that there was definitely strategic voting that was taking place there. You know, there was a very, very clear path, I think, for a lot of voters in those seats. People wanted change, and it was an electorate that showed it's sophisticated, it does pay attention, it's beyond the usual sort of tricks and spin, and people were tired of that. And I think that's how we've come to this result. Having said all of that, Labor's had a huge showing. You look at Western Australia, you look at metropolitan Victoria, big, big swings. So, you know, I think on both counts, it was a pretty good result.
David Alexander, as a Liberal yourself and a long-time Liberal advisor, what's your read on this, and where to from here when you look at seats like Curtin, North Sydney, Goldstein, all gone, Kooyong, Wentworth? If I told you that 10 years ago, you probably would think I was crazy, but now this is the reality that the Liberals are facing. How do you regroup?
Well, thanks, Kieran. I think the first thing to say is that, well, congratulations to Anthony Albanese. Great honour to be Prime Minister, and I'm sure all Australians wish him well. For the Liberal Party, it was a terrible result. There's no sugarcoating it. Lost government, lost a swag of seats, and also lost some future leaders in Josh Frydenberg and Dave Sharma. So that was terrible. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of examination of what just happened, but to get into government again, the coalition needs to present as a government capable of appealing across huge strata of Australia, huge swathes. It has to be a broad church, and it was obviously not up to it on the weekend.
David, one of the starting points surely has got to be to get more women into senior positions. And if you look at each of these teal candidates, all very capable women, and some of them from Liberal families, from, you know, blue blood Liberal families like the Spenders or the Cheneys. Yeah,
it was pretty striking. This issue had been brewing up for quite a while. So it was something that was really a few of these issues, women in politics issue, climate change, integrity, a number of these things haven't arrived out of nowhere. They've been brewing for a while, and then this is the end result from really, I guess, neglect is a large part of the reason why we've seen the result that we have.
Eamon Fitzpatrick, Anthony Albanese's copped a bit of flack for the gaffes and being a bit rough around the edges on the detail and so on. The one thing, though, which I would point to is, well, there's two things. People don't necessarily vote in oppositions, they vote out governments. That's the motivation when it happens generally, Eamon. And the other thing is, Albanese, despite the detail questions, has an authenticity which, as you know, in campaigning and politics is a very important asset to have.
Kieran, that's absolutely right. He is who he says he is, and he speaks from the heart. And I think after the 3-year term we've just seen, there was a real sort of call and a real desire from the electorate to see that. And I think, sure, there were a few sort of tricky moments at the start of the campaign, but it was so much more than just a couple of those tricky moments. People were genuine in their change, And people don't want to switch unless they know or have a good idea of what they're switching to. And I think Albo was exactly that. He was able to articulate what was going on. You know, there's been criticism, he was a small target, this sort of thing. That's not entirely true. There was a very, very steady, deliberate stream of policy announcements that Labor had out well in front. Added to that, it wasn't just Albo, who's highly experienced, but he had a very experienced team with him. When you start to look at the likes of Penny Wong, Richard Marles, Jim Chalmers, all of those people, you know, it starts to look like a very formidable front bench and a great government. And I think in the end, they absolutely made that option clear and people chose to go with it.
Well, he certainly also made the point, Eamon, that he's not just thinking about this election, he was thinking about the next. He said that repeatedly, actually. So people have, and the other thing he pointed out is that people have underestimated him many times over his life, and this is probably the latest example, Eamon.
Well, that's a great way to put it, because it's true. And the biggest thing, as someone who's done many, many political campaigns, the worst thing you can do is underestimate your opponent. That's clearly what's happened here, because Albo's a guy with plenty of experience. You know, he was, let's not forget who he was. He was the leader of the House when Julia Gillard, who I worked for, was Prime Minister. So he was the guy who was so critical, as Gillard said, in conducting a lot of those negotiations with the crossbench and that sort of thing. But in terms of underestimating people, let's not forget Anastasia Palaszczuk and how underestimated she was. One term, she went from 7-seat opposition, and look at the strength her government is in right now. So that's a very good lesson for everybody, I think.
Yeah, and I guess a lesson for Labor too, David Alexander, is to not underestimate, and I would say this very clearly, knowing the person involved, I wouldn't be underestimating Peter Dutton either as the next Liberal leader. If we're talking about underestimating people, he's one I would not be doing that to.
No, I think that's very true, Kieran. People would underestimate Peter at their peril. I think for each of the contenders, and we don't know who they will be for the Liberal leadership, what you have is people who have served in specific portfolios. So people who have had a little bit of a one-dimensional view of them over the years. When they become leader, they are able to offer up their vision, their broader picture, things that people have never heard them talk about before. And I think that really elevates whoever does become leader, gives them a brand new platform, and people, Australians generally will give people a fair go. They'll, you know, sit back and take a look and tell us what you really are. That's what will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And a chance for him to show all of those characteristics and capacity across a range of areas. David Alexander from Barton Deakin, former Liberal advisor, and Eamon Fitzpatrick from Fitzpatrick Advisory, former Labor advisor. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Talk to you soon.